Hey everyone, this is Tracy Friedlander. You're listening to Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. Today on the show, I have Ingrid Gerling. I met Ingrid on Instagram when I discovered that she was both a violinist and a jazz singer. After I looked her up, I saw that in addition to being a jazz singer and a freelance musician and teacher in the Houston area, she's a member of the Axiom Quartet, which was funny because I just interviewed the cellist of Axiom about starting your own chamber music ensemble earlier in the season. Today, Ingrid and I sit down to talk about creating a career you love that is unique to you. Her background as an immigrant from Brazil taught her a lot about independence that she was able to carry through her career. Ingrid has a lot to say about finding a music school that suits you and supports your unique abilities and loves. You never know how your other interests can contribute to your career. Ingrid's career is a fantastic example of that, and she has great advice for musicians on how to support your whole self, not just you as the one instrument you play, whether it's singing or whatever else you do. Also, a big thanks to Gabby Castro of the Clarinet Quartet Foreplay Clarinet. Gabby composed the new Crushing Classical theme music that you heard at the beginning of this episode. You can find out more about Gabby and what she does on Facebook and Instagram at Foreplay Clarinet, Fourplay Clarinet. Her handles are listed in the show notes. Before we start, I'd like to thank Fix Music for sponsoring Crushing Classical Podcast. Fix Music is your online resource for high-quality sheet music at great prices. There are some new offerings at Fix available that you'll want to know about. Now there's organ music, a large choral music selection, as well as orchestra parts that you would need for concerts and auditions. And now they are actively working with choral and orchestra directors to help plan seasons. So if you're a program director and you want some help on choosing pieces for your next season, contact Fix Music today through their website. And as always, free shipping on all domestic orders. Check out fixmusic.com for your sheet music needs and use the link in the show notes to receive 10% off your first order. Let's get started. Welcome, Ingrid.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks for coming on Crushing Classical.
My pleasure.
So Ingrid is a violinist in Houston, and then I recently found out you're also a jazz vocalist. I discovered you after I interviewed a member of one of the quartets you play with, Axiom Quartet, and I found you on Instagram and saw that you were singing, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. You're a violinist and a singer, and you do both actively. You actively perform in doing both. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your education and all that jazz? Pardon the pun.
Sure. Well, I started as a violinist, and I come from a very well-trained classical music family. Both my parents are musicians, and my oldest sister is also a classical musician.
Oh, wow.
So, I started playing the violin when I was really young, and it wasn't like expected that that my sisters and I would end up doing classical music, but it was kind of a good setup for us to end up in that route.
Right. So your parents are professionals as well?
Yes.
Wow.
They're both professional musicians. And then as far as singing, I don't know, that kind of happened later on in life. So should I tell you the whole story?
Yeah,
about
I want to know
how? Okay.
Yeah, definitely, because I think it's really. Tell us where you grew up first.
Okay. So I'm from Brazil, and I was born there. My whole family lives there. We're really just from Brazil, and so I grew up, and I started playing violin when I was 5, and so I did that. But actually, my first instrument was the recorder. So
was that like a school thing? Like they give it to you in kindergarten and you learn some tunes, or?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't at school. Brazil doesn't have that kind of like music education system that they have here. Mm-hmm. So I didn't actually do any music at school whatsoever. There's no music in school.
Oh, wow.
So my parents, though, put me in this um, like little music school. And so I learned how to read music and like notes and rhythms and stuff on the recorder. But I was also like kind of simultaneously playing the violin and learning
Okay.
from my dad. And
So your
so I
dad's a
was,
violinist too.
yes, oh yeah, my dad's a violinist and my mom's a pianist.
Great. And so did you always sing when you were a kid too? Was it something you enjoyed doing or?
Yeah, we I did sing. I loved, we had these like vinyl records
Yeah.
of bossa nova and jazz and stuff. And ever since I was little, I like learned how to use the record player, and I would put the records on and I would sing along with it. And so, and I would kind of sing with my sisters too. I mean, that like Brazilian music, I think was a big part of our household.
Yeah.
Nobody in my house like played Brazilian music, like actual instruments and stuff, but we listened to it
Hmm.
quite a bit. And so we would start, uh, we would sing songs and stuff together just for fun, but it was more like to be silly. But I guess I didn't realize how much those songs kind of stuck with me.
Yeah.
So it did kind of influence me a lot, which I kind of discovered later on. But so eventually, my dad was pursuing a doctorate degree in music in the United States, and that's why I moved to the United States when I was about 8 years old.
Okay. And so during this time, you're also learning English, right? Because you came to the U.S.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't speak any English.
wow, that must
So
have been hard to immerse yourself in English.
it was hard at first. Yeah, I had tried to learn English in Brazil. Like we took like little classes and stuff, but nothing stuck. Like I didn't remember anything. And so when I got to the United States, I really just knew like thank you, how are you, and a few like other phrases
Yeah.
and just some like standard responses like fine, you know. And
Yeah, because they don't teach little kids really the nitty gritty of learning a language in a school. You know,
yeah,
like you just learn how to count and stuff like that. Like you don't,
right.
so that must have been pretty intense.
And it was hard for me because in Brazil, I was like always like the smartest kid in the class, and I was like ahead a grade, and I was really like studious, and I always got good grades, and I always finished everything with ease. You know,
Mm-hmm.
nothing was difficult. And then I got to the United States, and I couldn't do my homework. I couldn't understand what I was supposed to do.
Mm,
I didn't know how to write like stories,
right.
like cuz I came and I was already in it was like 3rd grade. So by that point you're supposed to be like writing
Yeah.
fluently and like reading, and I had no idea. And so I just felt really dumb because I didn't understand what was happening, and I cried a lot.
Mm,
I was just like constantly confused.
ugh.
But I couldn't. I remember like one time when I went to the grocery store with my parents, and I asked my dad if he could buy me some gum, and he said no, you go buy it by yourself, because he was like pushing me to like
To
learn.
speak in English.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so he gave me some money, and but I guess it was like a couple cents short, like like 10 cents. I needed like another 10 cents or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to the cashier, and I gave her the gum and the money, and I just stared at her. Like I didn't say anything. And then she started talking to me, and I didn't know what she was saying, and I just started crying because I think she
Mm,
was saying you need more money or something, and I just didn't know. So there were a lot of experiences like that where I was just overwhelmed by the fact that I couldn't do anything. Like I couldn't
yeah.
communicate.
I can't imagine
But
how hard that would be. How did that affect your confidence?
I don't, it's weird because it all happened very quickly. I have these memories of those moments,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess within like a few months, I was fluent in English. So
Right,
it's
because you were
not,
8, and that's what happens.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
it's not something that like really affected me because eventually I was speaking really well and I just caught up,
Mm.
So, and I think it's actually now like a really great gift to be
Yeah,
bilingual. Uh,
definitely. And do you think that that experience taught you more in terms of like approaching other things in your career, like just knowing that you can learn something new and get through it? I mean, maybe that's just kind of in your brain now, in the background, that knowledge.
I think, well, I think that experience, yes, but probably the most influential, I think, is how my parents kind of handled it because
Mm,
they were always pushing for me to be very independent.
okay.
And that's kind of how they raised us to always be very independent. And I think part of the experience of like learning another language and just kind of being thrown into the fire kind of solidified that
Mm,
um, kind of attitude.
yeah.
And so I think I grew up with an attitude of I can do it, and just like a good two really good role models who were telling me like yes you can do it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, because it actually, I think it takes, well, and we'll get to your career and we'll talk all about
Mhm.
that, but I think it takes a lot of guts to, put your stake in the ground, so to speak, about like, here I am, I'm a violinist, I'm a singer, and I do these things. It's a lot harder. I mean, I'm not saying that taking auditions to get into an orchestra isn't hard, because it is, but to proclaim that you're creating a career in a city and then doing that takes confidence and independence. So I think it's related. I think this experience is definitely related to how you've created your career. So tell me more about your education. So, because I was really interested in you when you told me about your college that you went to,
Mhm.
and how. So tell me about that college, because so many people, I think they put a lot of pressure on themselves to go to a really big name music school, which you
School.
didn't do. So tell me about that.
Right. Yeah. So well, originally, so just to kind of put things back into perspective, after I lived in the United States and for my dad's degree, we moved back to Brazil.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So after we moved back to Brazil, and I continued playing violin, but I really wasn't that like dedicated to it. But I kept playing and I performed a lot. I mean, I even like soloed with orchestras and stuff. So it's hard to say that I wasn't dedicated to it, but I wasn't as like serious about it as someone in the United States typically is, who is like going to orchestra every day,
Right.
has like private lessons all the time. Like we just didn't have that infrastructure. So my parents encouraged me, well, and my mostly my violin teacher at the time encouraged me to pursue a different major, something that would be like more guaranteed, maybe like
Mm-hmm.
easier,
Right.
easier to be successful at. And so I eventually tried for architecture and I got into architecture school and I started doing architecture. And so the following summer, like after doing architecture semester, I went to a music festival and I met a teacher from Azusa Pacific University who heard me play and was like, well, I'll give you a full ride to go study in the United States music, right? To like major in music.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of like confusing, but all my sisters lived in the United States at this point, and I wanted to live in the United States because I missed living in the United States. Like a part of me had kind of become like attached to the United States because
Mm-hmm.
I kind of grew up in the United States as well.
Yeah.
And so I I was excited about going to the United States, and I eventually accepted to go to that school. And I was really mostly conflicted because I was not very religious, and that was a really religious school.
Hmm.
But as far as like the music program, it didn't really necessarily have anything to do with religion.
Right.
So, so it ended up being a great school. And
What did you like about it?
I liked the community
Hmm.
of teachers. Like it was a small environment, and so everybody knew you, and everybody was like eager to help you and like support you, you know.
Nice.
And I think like what I do now wouldn't really have been possible if I had gone to a bigger school. I mean, maybe it would have, because I think it's more kind of trendy now to be like a multi-passionate kind of musician. But it's just like I imagine like if I had gone like say to a big name school for violin,
Uh-huh.
I would have been heavily encouraged to just pursue like
Oh, yeah.
orchestral auditions, or just an academic career, or
Oh, for
like,
sure. Yeah, they
just
they wouldn't be
pick
like
one track because they
exactly.
want. And because I went to this other school, it was like it was considered super cool to like take voice lessons and uh, try this other thing. Like it just never I never felt like I could only pick one track. And so that's one thing that was nice about that school.
Yeah, because I think a lot of
Um,
people struggle with this. I mean, I've talked to lots of students actually nowadays, probably not back when I went to school, because people just sort of focused, at least where I went to school. But now I hear people say that a lot. Like they like so many things and it's hard for them to choose. And you're right about larger schools. I mean, there's a possibility, depending on which school, that would have been supported. But I know that schools, a lot of times, what you do after school is really important to them because it makes them look a certain way. You know, they can
right,
say, oh, all of these graduates have gotten jobs in orchestras, so that makes the school look more desirable or something. You know what I mean?
right.
So it's great that you went to the school that was supportive for you to explore all of your interests.
Yeah, and this school in particular, I realize when I look at like the alumni of my kind of my cohort or whatever,
Yeah,
there were a lot of very creative, outside of the box artists who graduated from there. Like,
that's cool.
like that. I don't know if you're familiar with that girl Miranda Sings.
I think I've seen her on Instagram.
Yeah, she has like a Netflix series and like millions of followers, and
Oh,
like
wow.
she's really, really, really famous, and she was like my classmate.
Oh, really?
But it's like she studied voice, but she wasn't told like you can only be an opera singer.
Mm-hmm.
And so she pursued something that's totally different, that was like very her. It was like her creation, her idea, and it was successful. And I think that school really nurtured people to think like about their unique gifts.
That's
Like
amazing. What
what
is the school called again?
Azusa Pacific
Okay.
University.
We should definitely keep their link in the show notes because it's that sounds like a great school.
I mean, it was, and I mean, it really, it's up to each individual person to see what fits them. But for
Hmm.
me, it ended up being a very nurturing environment, and I felt very supported and empowered
That's
to
important.
pursue other things. So
Well,
yeah.
I just actually just on a recent episode, the last episode that launched, the person I interviewed told me that he designed his own major too for I think it was his master's. So it's interesting when you can design something that's specifically a track of study that's specifically to you that it supports your success, I think. So
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
that's the school where you discovered you wanted to sing as well, right?
Yeah, so I had a roommate who had a voice teacher who was like really cool, and I had heard my whole life that I should take voice lessons, and back in Brazil when had a little like phase of learning the guitar, I would sing along as I played the guitar, like for Brazilian music. And everybody's reaction was always very positive, like, oh, like you have a really nice voice, or, you know, you should sing more, or whatever. And I was always very shy about it. It was never something like, oh, yeah, I'm an amazing singer. You're right. I'm so great. And so with this roommate, actually was like, yeah, you should. I think, I don't know if I was required to pick a minor or if I was like given the option of picking a minor in another instrument. I don't remember. But I just remember that for whatever reason, I was going to take voice lessons. And so I started taking voice lessons with this teacher, and it was like really cool because she asked me, like, you know, what do you want to sing? And I said Brazilian music. And I started singing, and she was just like super like blown away and like very excited. And then I remember like when I had my first voice jury, and the other teacher was like, his mouth was just wide open, and he was like, I could listen to you sing all day long.
Wow, that's a nice compliment.
I know. And I was like, you know, just like hearing things like that, I was really encouraged because these are professionals. These are people like in the Los Angeles like studio recording scene, you know, like who really enjoyed it. So,
did you have people try to convince you to focus only on voice then, and then?
No, you know? I mean, I don't think. I think the only people who said, you know, you have to make a decision at one point were probably like my parents, but I think they said that earlier on when I was younger and I was, you know, trying to play violin, guitar, and flute and piano, and I just like wanted to learn all these instruments, and I think they were mostly concerned that I wouldn't be able to excel at one.
Right.
Because I was distracted. But I think because I was majoring in violin, I don't think anybody would have tried to say, you know, you should only sing. And also in my undergrad, which was kind of in LA County, I wasn't doing any like professional singing. I was just singing in school for the lessons, for the jury. So that was kind of just like a side thing. And eventually I moved to Pittsburgh to get my master's. And so I decided to keep taking voice lessons when I got there, which was great because there was this voice teacher there who's an amazing jazz vocalist. And she really taught me a lot of repertoire. And at that point, I started getting like gigs, which was really exciting. So I met people that kind of helped me set up my own show. And that was probably the most, maybe like the turning point for me as far as singing, when I learned like 40 songs and I did my own show, like just Ingrid and the band, you know?
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and that was when I felt like I could kind of do it professionally because I had the repertoire and I had the stage presence already. Because I had been playing on a stage my whole life. It's not like I needed to learn how to be comfortable on a stage.
Right.
But I didn't know that I could sing for, 3 hours and like entertain an audience. And so I did that, and then I got another gig, and I would just periodically get like more opportunities to sing. And I kept doing that, not like intensely, I was always more focused on the violin. Yeah. And honestly, I just, technically speaking, I think the violin is just such a difficult instrument to master. it's like it's a very jealous instrument. You can never put it down. Like the minute you stop practicing it, you just lose it.
Right.
So it's actually a really difficult instrument to have as like, to do both things is really hard because you really need to dedicate a lot of time for the violin to feel good.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's how horn is. You
Yeah,
can't.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's, but singing is something that does kind of come naturally to me. So even if I do practice singing, it doesn't feel as like time consuming as
Right.
practicing the violin.
You can
So I
practice
think
in the shower or while you're cooking, right?
yeah, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't say I can't really practice like technique because you need to be focused, but to like memorize lyrics and things like that, you can do that
Yeah.
while you're driving or whatever.
Did you always know that you didn't want to audition for orchestras, or did you ever?
I never did. I never did like a professional audition. I've done auditions for like sub lists,
Mm-hmm.
maybe like two auditions, but it's really a like horrifying experience for me.
Yeah, it's horrifying for everybody.
I think so. Yeah. Like so. What I was saying about being comfortable, and this is something that I'm thinking about a lot lately. It's like it's not necessarily good to be comfortable for a really long time. So it can kind of keep you from pursuing new discoveries, I think.
Yes.
So, I think that it's actually really intimidating to take orchestra auditions, but I enjoy the process of practicing excerpts, knowing that like you really have to get your playing to such a high level because it's in a way it's almost like a cleansing experience. You're so focused and you're so determined to nail it and just get it totally right that it really raises your level of playing overall. Even if you don't succeed at the audition. But I don't know if I would be really happy at this point playing in an orchestra. I mean, maybe I would because I really enjoyed playing in orchestra when I was in school, like for my doctorate,
Yeah.
And I love playing in orchestras every once in a while. Like I play for this orchestra in San Antonio. It's a chamber orchestra in San Antonio, and I love playing with them. So I love playing in the orchestra setting.
But maybe not for a job. I mean, the job would be the same. You'd be doing, and you do so many different things. So maybe at this point, it's not. Is that what you're saying? That it's not something you want to do lifestyle wise?
Yeah, and it's hard to say that I wouldn't want to because I've never had that job professionally. I've never been in a professional orchestra.
Right.
So I don't know.
But you're not pursuing it.
But I'm definitely not pursuing it at this point because I think what I'm more interested in would be to like have a university position. Like I already have a university position, but to be like a full-time tenured professor at a university where it kind of gives you the support to be a chamber musician and like creatively explore other outlets, you know?
Yeah. So
because I think if I was an orchestra musician, I would not have probably the time to pursue as many projects as I do.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, it's really difficult. You're learning like, huge programs, new programs every week. And there's so much pressure, and not that there isn't pressure in other ways, but.
That's true. So are you pursuing a larger teaching position now too?
No, I guess I just want to invest more in the positions that I already have. But so my studio at the university is growing significantly, and I think that naturally because, like I said earlier, my parents are musicians, but they are both university professors.
Mm.
So they both are, tenured professors. One is violin, one is piano, and they still perform regularly. But I kind of grew up seeing that, like seeing them dedicating their life to like teaching and like building up their students and setting them up for success and stuff. And I really enjoyed doing that. Well, literally, it's so hard to separate because people just always have this stigma of like either you're an educator or you're a performer.
Yeah.
And I really am both. Like, I'm so passionate about both, like 100%. So I would never say it's one or the other.
That's great. That's really important I think so many people think they have to choose one thing, and you're just the example of that you're not choosing only one thing in so many areas. So that's really great advice. What other advice do you have for musicians? Like, for example, musicians who want to do more than play just their main instrument, like sing or any other kind of activity. What would you say?
Well, I was thinking about this morning. Like, sometimes we think, oh, other people are going to judge me for this or whatever. And I had a thought that maybe actually when we think that, that's actually our own, thoughts about ourselves and our own judgments of ourselves that we like to project onto other people. But it's really that those negative voices are not coming from others. They're just coming from ourselves.
That's so true.
So I guess my greatest advice would be to just kind of go for it because, I always tell people like nobody dies if you sound bad.
Right. Yeah.
Like you're really not hurting anyone by trying something new. So there's absolutely no reason to be afraid, and nothing says that like, oh, you want to be a singer doesn't mean you have to suddenly be posting your like, initial attempts on YouTube or whatever. Like you can do things
That's
on
so
your
true.
own for a long time and kind of just be building the confidence and the skill.
Yeah.
And then eventually share it with people that you're comfortable with.
That's such good advice. That's so true. You don't have to. No one gets hurt. Nothing's bad's gonna happen, and it is your own head thinking people are gonna say stuff because people usually, if they do say stuff, you're not gonna hear it most of the time anyway. So who cares, right?
Right.
So it's great.
And I think my other advice is that I've seen a lot of. I think people are really comfortable putting labels and boxes. And so it takes some time to break certain stereotypes, like the one I was saying about being an educator and being a performer.
Yeah.
Like the minute I told people that I got a university job, they were like, oh, that's too bad because I really enjoyed watching you perform. And I was like, hello, like I'm not quitting performing. In fact, I think it would be hypocritical to be teaching performance majors when you don't perform yourself.
Right.
So it took a while for people to see that I can conduct an orchestra, sing at a jazz club, play violin in a quartet, and teach, university students. Like it just takes time for people to even like believe it or something. And what I was saying about it being more trendy is that now that I look into like different performers and stuff, I see more and more people who do multiple things because they're realizing that like that's what makes them who they are.
Right.
And there's no reason to try to be like somebody else when you could try to be more like yourself.
Do you notice a lot of musicians who want to sing or wish they could sing and never took lessons? Do you tell them they should take lessons, or what's your advice for people who want to sing more?
Uh, well, I think it just depends, but I think singing, generally everybody can sing.
Yeah.
If you can't sing, then you kind of know it. Like,
Yeah.
and I think if you really can't sing, like you have problems with like identifying pitches and stuff, it's generally not something that you really want to pursue. Like, I don't know anybody who sings really badly and is like, oh, I really wish I was a singer.
Right.
Like, and like seriously wishes that.
Right.
Um, but I think with anything, you have to stop wishing.
Hmm.
If you want something, you have to go and get it. And you can't like wait for the right moment or the right day or whatever. At some point, you have to make a decision and a goal, strategy, like a plan to make something happen, even if it's
Yes.
a small step. But
That's awesome.
you got to make some
Some step.
steps.
Yeah, because this first step leads to the next step. And
Right.
you don't see the second step until you take the first one. That's great.
Oh, there's one more thing I was thinking about. I don't remember where it was that I read this or heard this, but it was just the idea that instead of like competing with other people, you can make your product or yourself be like outside of the like so unique that it's not in competition with what other people are offering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's it's another concept that encouraged me to pursue singing and playing the violin because I didn't want to be just like every other violinist.
Yeah, exactly. I talk about this a lot on this podcast because if you're a singer violinist, there's not like a whole category of singer violinists who sing bossa nova, and teach
Yeah.
and play and like recently I had someone on who's a violinist and a food blogger. So she has her Instagram is set up with both. So she shares violin and she has a big part of her audience shows up to see what she's baking, So
Yeah.
it's totally, she made her own category, and so did you. So I think it's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So for musicians who want that kind of support, like that you're talking about that you found in your school, do you
Hmm.
have any advice for people what to look for when they're seeking out schools?
Yeah. I mean, I think the most important thing always is finding a teacher that really cares about you,
Mm,
like a private teacher,
yes.
right? Because you end up seeing that person every week, and more often than not, they become like, I don't know, like not a therapist, but someone who has a lot of power to influence
Mm-hmm.
your confidence.
Absolutely.
If every time that you go to the lesson you feel empowered, then you're going to accomplish a lot more and you're going to discover a lot more about yourself and what you're capable of. Whereas if every time you go to your lesson and the teacher just says you suck, you need to practice more.
Yeah,
This is unacceptable. You'll never make it. It has the power to really cut you down.
it does.
So I think more than anything, finding the right environment for yourself is the most important. And
Absolutely.
that doesn't it doesn't have to only be in your undergrad or in your master's or whatever, because you can pick up a new thing and learn something new at any moment in your life.
I agree.
So finding a good mentor who can encourage you with whatever that dream is really important.
That's so great. That is such valuable advice. I mean, it's so true. You spend so much time with your private teacher, one on one, and everything they say just really during that time period of your life too. You're in your 20s. Um, that has a big influence on how you feel about what you're doing. So that's I think that's such great advice. The number one most important thing is your relationship with that teacher, and if they're supportive and they really care about you.
And also, like, if they are somebody that is inspiring,
Mm-hmm.
because you want to be continuously inspired and like see an example of what you want to become or accomplish.
Yes.
So it's helpful if the person that is like motivating you is also living out that reality.
Absolutely. Which is exactly who you are as a teacher. Which is,
Well,
sounds like
I
to
really
me.
try to.
Yeah. That's why your studio's growing.
Hopefully.
So, do you have anything coming up that you'd like to promote?
Yeah, well, I wanted to say about the summer festivals that I'm teaching
Oh, yeah.
at. So I'm teaching at a few different ones. I was invited to teach at the University of North Texas, the Summer String Institute there.
Okay.
So that's July 14th through 28th.
And can people still apply?
Yes. The application deadline is April 29th.
Okay.
And so that's it can be a 1 week or a 2 week thing.
What's the age range for this?
I think it's mostly like high school and college, like
Okay.
undergrad, but maybe like mostly up to 20, 22 or something like that,
Okay.
around that age. And then Axiom, my quartet, is hosting a camp. I conduct the orchestra for that camp and also do chamber music coaching.
Great.
So that camp is June 10th through the 14th. It's just 1 week. That's in Houston. The other one that I was saying, that's in Denton, Texas.
Okay.
So the Axiom camp, there's more information about that on our website.
Okay, great. I'll put those links in the show notes for everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then the other camp that I'm working for is also here in Houston. It's for another organization that I work for called AFA, American Festival of the Arts. And they have their camp in the summer.
Well, sounds like you've got a full summer schedule.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. I was like, oh, where am I going to go this summer? And then I realized I'm like,
you're going to go to Texas
for like 2 months. But it's great. I'm really excited about all these projects. So I'm really
Yeah, and you just got back from
forward to it.
Spain too, didn't you?
Yeah, Spain was really fantastic, recording a CD there.
Great.
So
Is that going to be for sale on your website?
yeah, and I'd probably not on my website, but it'll be on all the major things like Spotify, iTunes, and etc.
Okay, well, you have to post about it when it comes out on Instagram.
Yeah, I totally will.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ingrid. This has been such a valuable conversation.
Thank you, Tracy. It's been a pleasure.